Welcome back to another episode of me making a piece of furniture. We are in my backyard in the Catskills here, and this is my Kalamazoo chopping bandsaw. It was in an early video on my channel where I talked about rescuing it from the New York City seaport. They were going to scrap it for metal, and a friend of mine saved it for me. I'm chopping 2-inch 6262 T6511 aluminum. I purchased it at onlinemetals.com, and that rod was 5 feet long. It probably was about 180 bucks. And here we are on my new South Bend lathe. It's new to me, but it was built in 1944 according to the serial number. And there I just set up my tapering jig, and the main reason for this video is to experiment with my tapering jig. And here I am operating the controls. I'm making 3 of these legs, and they're going to be tapered. They ultimately end up looking kind of like vampire spikes, which is why I'm calling it the vampire spike table. And I'm taking shallow passes with a sort of a rough bit. I'm experimenting here. My machining skills are still in the learning phase, and right here I'm taking a really big pass. You could see that I'm taking a pass over 1/10 of an inch, and all these other passes are much lighter. But the lathe has several settings, and one of them is what you call back gears, where you have super slow, super strong. It's all run mostly on several geared down gears and pulleys, which give it high strength but a slow turn, and you're able to hog out a lot of metal. And here I'm doing a finishing pass on one of the 2 legs, which I'm working on there. Yeah, this must be the first leg. And then I'm using a couple of different grits. I'm working my way through the grits there, and I'm probably at about 320 right there. And I use my palm sander just to get rid of any lines, because you tend to get lines when you just put the sandpaper right on it. And then I'm using like a rough steel wool, and then I go down to like a 000, and it pulls a polish right up on that thing. And then ultimately I'll take it to the polishing wheel. But you can see there's my first taper success. Then I made a second one right away, and then I go back and make a third one. This is the next day. This is really my first experience on this particular lathe. It's a South Bend 16-inch. It's about 6 feet long. I can cut a piece of material approximately 6 feet long. And again, I'm taking a finishing pass, and you can see the change in texture. It goes shiny. And there you have it. Taking out my last piece. I put a little chamfer at the very tip. And now, this is a slice of maple. There is a sawmill in the neighborhood, and we drove by it years ago, and he had about 7 or 8 of these lying outside, offering them for sale. And we bought this one. I think it was $20. And it's been drying in the house. It was leaning on the wall in the house for a while, and then we put it outside. And it's been maybe 4 or 5 years. So I belt sanded it in the property, and now I'm back in the city, and I'm palm sanding it. It's end grain, and there's lots of deep chainsaw marks from the person who cut it down, so it's really difficult to get those out. I did the best I could. And now here I am, I'm laying out the circles for the legs. The legs are going to poke directly through the surface, and I wanted to make sure that they were geometrically accurate, so they're exactly 1/3 apart from each other. And now here I am drilling the hole. I'm drilling a 2-inch hole with a Forstner bit. I'm using the battery operated drill to start with, but then I switched to an electric because it just was not strong enough. Drilling directly into end grain with a 2-inch bit, it really slows down. And the bit had a tendency to walk on that surface, which means it didn't want to stay right where I started. So I kind of had to start inside this holder, and even walked with that holder a little bit. So by drilling the hole in 2x4 and clamping it to the wood, I'm able to start the hole without it walking away from me. Do it again, and then once I get started, then I give it the angle. And all 3 angles are sort of random, because I wanted the legs to look like they were thrown through the top and not necessarily perfectly placed in there. And here you go. I'm going to test fit one. And there you go. You'll notice I only did about 2/3 with the spike because I knew there was a considerable amount that needed to stay parallel. And here I am testing. I wanted these spikes to look like they were hammered through the surface. And so that's why I'm hammering the top of the thing. Cold. I'm just doing it cold. I don't have a forge in the city, so I'm just experimenting here, playing around, looking at it. This idea originally came because I found a chunk of wood in the dumpster, and it had big, thick, steel-cut nails in it, like 8-inch ones. And it occurred to me, wouldn't it be cool if they were big enough to become the legs of this piece of wood? And so that's sort of how my imagination works when I see things in the garbage. And now here it is about 6 or 7 years later. And it's finally coming to fruition, but not necessarily how I first pictured it. I could still do this project again with like steel cut nails. That was my original vision. So like big forged nails, like 20 inches long, that are as fat as this one I'm holding, but all square. And since the bit walked on me a little bit, I started to sand them in, and it kind of gave this little puffy look, which I liked. So I'm just showing a detail of that. I started with linseed oil, and it just kept soaking in. I probably put that entire can over the course of about 5 days into that table, and it still just kept soaking in. Nothing was staying at the surface, allowing me to give it a polish. And so over the course of several days, I gave it a few coats of polyurethane, satin finished polyurethane. In there, of course, I'm buffing the spike legs. And so I just kept building up the polyurethane, and then I finally had enough on there to palm sand it nice and flat. And then I gave it a wax finish. Actually, Willie did it with me. He gave it the final polish because I'm just not that good at it. And here I am putting the legs in. And I'm making sure that the table is going to stand at about 15 inches. So that's why I'm just checking to make sure that at least 12 of it is sticking through the bottom. Those are about 19 inches long. And I was going to trim them originally and have that mush be closer to the surface of the table. But I love the way this looks. Oh, and I intentionally left out the bow tie because I think everybody's going to expect the bow tie. And I think they're just a little too cliche. And if this table breaks, I'll just fix it. So I'm not overly concerned. I'm going to keep this one. Just a detail. And there it is. The legs look like they were thrown through the top by Zeus, and that's what I wanted.